Tonight, we wade slowly into warm, shallow water, into a world where the light filters soft and green through the surface, where the current barely moves, and where one of the ocean's most improbable animals drifts through the hours with a patience that feels almost like a lesson. Hello there, and welcome to deep sea slumber. There are creatures in this world built for speed, for drama, for the sudden and the sharp. The manatee is not one of them. It is something rarer. It is a very large animal living a very quiet life, shaped by warm water and soft plants, and long, unhurried hours of simply being present in the world. It weighs as much as a small car. It moves as though it has nowhere to be, and nowhere else it would rather go. What makes the manatee remarkable is not what it does in moments of crisis. It is what it does in all the other moments. The long, slow arc of a day spent grazing through shallow water, surfacing without urgency, resting on the floor of a river, feeling the world through whiskers sensitive enough to read the texture of a leaf. This is an animal that has found a way to be very large and very gentle at the same time. That combination is stranger and more wonderful than it first appears. They have been here for a long time. The manatee's lineage stretches back through immense spans of planetary change, through warm seas and shifting coastlines, through eras that swallowed other animals whole. And through all of it, the manatee's essential answer has remained the same. Find warm water, find soft plants, move slowly, breathe steadily, and persist. There is something in that answer that feels less like survival and more like wisdom. Tonight, we will spend time with this animal in the way it deserves, unhurriedly. We will follow its body through the physics of warm, shallow water. We will sit beside the mathematics of how something so large can live on something so small. We will trace the long, slow clock of a manatee's day and the even longer clock of its evolutionary history. And somewhere in all of that, I think we will find something that speaks to the part of us that is also tired, also warm, also ready to simply float for a while. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. Now, let your shoulders soften a little. You don't need them to be doing anything right now. Let whatever you've been carrying today settle somewhere it doesn't need your attention. Let your breath find its own pace, not slower on purpose, just allowed to arrive when it arrives. And as we begin to drift down into the warm, still water where the manatee lives, let your body remember that it already knows how to rest. It has always known. Sometimes it just needs permission. Let's begin. The more you look at a manatee, the more its gentleness seems to come from structure itself. The body is enormous. An adult can reach 11 feet in length and weigh more than 1,000 pounds. That is not a small animal in any sense. And yet, the word that comes most naturally when watching one is not massive or imposing or even large. The word is round. Everything about the manatee is round. The head, the belly, the flippers, the paddle-shaped tail. It is a body without sharp angles, a body that seems in some essential way to have decided against edges. That decision is not accidental, it is architecture. The manatee's skeleton is dense in a way that most mammals' skeletons are not. The bones are pachyostotic, a word that means simply thick, unusually, almost abnormally thick. Where other mammals have hollow or light bones, designed to reduce weight and allow speed, The manatee has bones that are nearly solid throughout. Its ribs, in particular, are heavy. They weigh considerably more than you would expect, given their size. A single manatee rib can be as dense as a rock. This sounds like a disadvantage, and on land, it would be. Solid bones are heavy bones, and heavy bones make movement harder, costlier, slower. But a manatee does not live on land. It lives in water, and in water the calculation reverses entirely. Dense bones act as ballast. They counteract the buoyancy of a body that is also full of fat and gas, the natural tendency of a large air-breathing mammal to float. The manatee's heavy skeleton is, in effect, a built-in weight belt. It keeps the animal neutrally buoyant, hovering in the water column without effort, without constant swimming, without fighting the physics of its own body. The bones do not drag the animal down. They hold it steady. They make hovering possible. That is the wonder of it. What reads as clumsiness, the heaviness, the density, the sheer solidity, is in fact precision. The manatee carries its own ballast inside itself, in the architecture of its bones, and because of that, it can float in place above a seagrass bed for hours, without burning energy it cannot afford to spend. The dense skeleton is not a flaw. It is the reason stillness is possible. Along the top of the manatee's body, the lungs are positioned differently than in most mammals. They run horizontally, stretched long from front to back, rather than concentrated in the chest. This layout gives the manatee unusual control over its pitch in the water, its angle relative to the surface. By adjusting how much air fills different parts of the lungs, the animal can tilt itself gently, nose down to graze, nose up to surface, or level to drift. It is a subtle system, and it operates continuously, mostly without the manatee seeming to attend to it at all. The body manages its own orientation, quietly, the way a boat with good ballast rights itself without needing to be steered. Combined with the dense bones and the slow metabolism, this means that a manatee hovering above the seafloor is doing very little work. The body has arranged itself so that very little work is required. The physics of staying still have been solved at the level of anatomy. The tail is a paddle, wide, flat, rounded at the edges, shaped something like a horizontal fan. It moves up and down, not side to side, the way a dolphin's fluke moves, in the vertical plane that marks a mammal's body plan rather than a fish's. Each stroke is long and slow. There is no urgency in it. The tail generates forward motion with a kind of unhurried authority, the way a wide oar moves through still water, displacing a great deal with each pull. Manatees are not fast. Their typical cruising speed is somewhere around 3 to 5 miles per hour. In short bursts, they can move faster, perhaps 15 miles per hour, briefly, under pressure. But fast movement is expensive, and the manatee's entire body is organized around not being expensive. Speed is available when needed. It is simply not the point. The flippers are equally expressive. They are the forelimbs of a land mammal, rearranged by millions of years of aquatic life into something paddle-like, flexible, capable of fine movement. Manatees use their flippers to steer, to push off from the bottom, to hold food, and to touch. They have been observed cradling objects, pressing their flippers together in gestures that look, from a certain angle, almost like folded hands. The bones inside the flipper are the same bones that are inside a human arm and hand, the same structure, carried through a different history into a different shape. There are even small nails at the ends of the flippers. Flat, blunt, vestigial. They are remnants of something older, a memory of terrestrial life encoded in the body long after the animal returned to water. They do almost nothing now, but they are there, quietly reminding anyone who looks that a manatee is a mammal who went back, who chose the water again after its ancestors had already left it. The face is where the body becomes most surprising. A manatee's upper lip is divided and mobile. The two halves can move independently of each other, grasping and manipulating vegetation with a dexterity that seems improbable given the animal's general roundness. The lips are not hands, but they function something like hands, selecting, pulling, tearing, positioning. They are the manatee's primary tool for feeding, and they are extraordinarily precise given their size. Surrounding the lips and covering much of the face are whiskers. Not a few decorative whiskers, as a cat has, but hundreds of them, dense and organized, covering the muzzle and extending across the cheeks and forehead. These are vibrissae, sensory hairs connected to dense networks of nerve endings. Each whisker is a receptor. Each one registers pressure, movement, texture, the resistance of a leaf, the current of water displaced by something passing nearby. The manatee's face is, in effect, a sensing surface. It reads the environment through touch in a way that human hands approximate only roughly. When a manatee moves its lips across a seagrass bed, it is receiving a continuous stream of detailed tactile information. The firmness of the stems, the texture of the blades, the presence of sand or sediment below. The whiskers are not decoration. They are navigation. What makes this remarkable is that it speaks to a different relationship with the world than vision or speed provide. The manatee is not chasing anything. It is not scanning for threats from a distance. It is close to its food, close to the bottom, close to the temperature gradient of the water around it, and it is reading all of that through its skin. The face knows the world by touching it. The skin itself is thick and wrinkled, rough in texture, grayish-brown, often colonized by algae that give it a greenish cast in older animals. Barnacles sometimes attach. Scars accumulate from boat propellers. So many, in fact, that researchers have learned to identify individual manatees by the specific pattern of scars on their backs, the way each encounter with a passing hull leaves its own mark. The skin is a record of a life spent in waters that humans also use. Beneath the skin lies a substantial layer of fat, called blubber in the loosest sense, though less insulating than the blubber of cold water species. Manatees are warm water animals. They do not tolerate cold well. Their fat layer helps maintain body temperature in the subtropical and tropical waters they prefer, but it is also part of the overall volume of the animal. The roundness, the softness, the sense of a body that has mass in every direction. That fat is also an energy reserve, though a modest one. Manatees do not have the deep reserves that allow some marine mammals to fast for weeks or months. They must eat regularly. Their metabolism is low, their energy budget is tight, and their relationship with food is almost continuous. The body's roundness comes not from excess, but from necessity. From the need to carry enough fuel to keep a large, slow, cold-sensitive animal moving through a world that can turn cold without warning. Imagine the manatee from above, drifting over a shallow seagrass bed in warm, clear water. The body is almost perfectly still. The tail moves once, slowly. The animal sinks slightly, angles its nose toward the bottom, and begins to graze. The flippers hang loose at the sides. The whiskers press into the grass. The heavy bones keep everything level. The long lungs distribute air across the body's length. The divided lip grasps a stem. Every part of the design is working. Every apparently awkward feature is doing exactly what it was shaped to do. The barrel shape minimizes drag at low speeds. The dense bones provide ballast. The long lungs provide trim. The paddle tail provides slow, efficient thrust. The mobile lip and sensitive whiskers provide precise feeding in the absence of hands. The thick skin and fat layer provide warmth and protection. Nothing about this body is accidental. Nothing is unfinished. It is a body designed not for the world as most mammals experience it, running, climbing, chasing, fleeing, but for a very specific world. Shallow, warm, plant-filled, quiet. A world where efficiency matters more than speed, where touch matters more than distance, where the ability to hover in place above a meal is more valuable than the ability to run from a predator. The manatee does not look like a precision instrument. That is part of what makes it so easy to underestimate. But the roundness is the precision. The slowness is the efficiency. The apparent softness is the architecture of a life that has found over millions of years exactly the shape it needed to be. It simply does not look the way we expect competence to look. And that, quietly, is the more interesting fact, that competence has more shapes than we tend to imagine. That a body can be slow and massive and round and still be exactly right for the world it was made for. That the manatee, drifting above its seagrass bed, whiskers pressed into the soft green blades, is not a clumsy thing that somehow survives. It is a refined thing, precisely calibrated, doing exactly what it was built to do. It drifts, it grazes, it breathes, and the body, in its slow and unhurried way, continues to be exactly sufficient for all of it. And once the body makes sense, another question rises almost immediately. How does a creature this large fuel itself so quietly? A full-grown manatee can weigh more than 1,000 pounds. Some reach 1,300. A few, in the right conditions, exceed that. This is the weight of a small car. It is the weight of a horse and a half. And the animal carrying that weight through the water does so on a diet of seagrass, water hyacinth, hydrilla, and whatever aquatic vegetation the season and the habitat provide. No fish, no crustaceans, no animal protein at all in the ordinary course of a manatee's life. Just plants. Slow, soft, calorie-sparse plants. That is the question that settles in when you sit with it long enough. The mathematics of mammal metabolism are demanding. Warm blood is expensive. Maintaining a constant body temperature in water, which pulls heat away from a body roughly 25 times faster than air, costs something. A manatee is not small. A manatee is not fast. A manatee is not, by any obvious measure, designed to thrive on the leanest possible fuel source while carrying the most possible weight through a medium that is constantly drawing warmth away from it. And yet, here it is, widespread, ancient, and apparently quite comfortable. The answer, when you trace it carefully, turns out to be a kind of elegant arithmetic. The first number in that arithmetic is temperature. Manatees are found almost exclusively in water above 68 degrees Fahrenheit, around 20 degrees Celsius. Below that threshold, they begin to lose heat faster than they can replace it. This is not a preference. It is a physiological boundary. They have very little blubber compared to cold water marine mammals. A dolphin in Arctic waters is insulated differently than a manatee in a Florida spring. The manatee did not develop the thick lipid armor of a seal or a beluga whale. It developed something else instead, a life organized around warmth. If the water is warm enough, the metabolic cost of simply existing drops significantly. The body is not fighting the cold. The body is resting in an environment that cooperates with it. That cooperation is foundational to everything else. The second number is speed, or the deliberate absence of it. Manatees move slowly, not slowly for a large animal or slowly by the standards of something grazing on a flat seabed. Slowly in absolute terms. A typical manatee travels at somewhere between 3 and 5 miles per hour in ordinary movement. When startled or motivated, they can reach 15, but they rarely choose to. The ordinary pace of a manatee's life is closer to a drift than a swim. And that pace is not laziness, it is conservation. Every metabolic system in a warm-blooded body burns fuel proportional to the work it does. A manatee moving slowly burns far less than a manatee moving quickly. This seems obvious, but the implications run deeper than they first appear. A life organized around slow movement is a life in which the caloric requirements of locomotion are reduced to near minimum. The manatee does not chase prey across open water. It does not need to sprint to escape predators in any sustained way. It does not patrol territory or compete through displays of physical power. It moves from one patch of vegetation to the next at a pace that is closer to grazing than hunting, and in doing so, it keeps its energy expenditure remarkably low for an animal of its size. Low speed becomes a strategy. Slowness is not a limitation. It is the mechanism by which this whole arrangement works. And yet, even a slow, warm-water herbivore needs enormous quantities of raw material to sustain a body that size. Here, the third number enters: volume. A manatee eats roughly 10 to 15% of its body weight in vegetation every single day. For a 1,000-pound animal, that means somewhere between 100 and 150 pounds of aquatic plants daily. Not over a week, not as an occasional surplus. Every day as a baseline requirement of staying alive. That figure, when you hold it still for a moment, is staggering. It means that a manatee's waking life is organized almost entirely around finding and consuming food. The estimates vary, but researchers who have observed manatees in the wild consistently note that these animals spend between 6 and 8 hours each day actively feeding. Some studies suggest more. The feeding is not dramatic. There is no chase, no ambush, no battle. The animal moves over a seagrass bed, wraps its prehensile upper lip around a clump of vegetation, pulls, chews, moves forward, and repeats. Over and over, hour after hour. The work is patient and continuous, and from a distance it can look almost meditative. A large animal doing the same slow thing for a very long time. But the patience is doing real work. 150 pounds of seagrass does not appear in a single place. It requires moving through a habitat, reading the bottom, finding dense patches, returning to productive areas, and covering enough ground each day to meet a quota that never decreases. The manatee's knowledge of its territory, where the plants are thickest, where the water runs warm, where the currents carry seeds and growth, is not incidental to its survival. It is essential. The body's demands require a mind that has learned to navigate them. But even this does not fully answer the question. Because seagrass is not a particularly calorie-dense food. It is tough, fibrous, and in some species quite abrasive. The simple act of pulling nutrients from that material requires a digestive system capable of breaking down cellulose and extracting energy from compounds that most mammals cannot process at all. Manatees have solved this through the architecture of their gut. The manatee's intestinal tract is extraordinarily long, longer proportionally than you might expect even for a large herbivore. Estimates place the total length of the digestive system at around 45 meters in an adult animal. 45 meters. The body outside is perhaps 3 meters long. The interior is 15 times that. All of that length is surface area, and surface area is where absorption happens. The longer the tract, the more time vegetation spends in contact with the walls of the gut, and the more completely the available nutrients can be extracted before the residue is expelled. But length alone is not enough to handle plant cellulose. Manatees, like horses and elephants, and the relationship to elephants is not accidental, rely on hindgut fermentation to break down fibrous plant material. Populations of microorganisms living in the large intestine produce enzymes that the manatee's own cells cannot. These microbial communities do the work of decomposing cellulose into compounds the body can absorb. The manatee provides the habitat. The microbes provide the chemistry. It is a collaboration, quiet and internal, that has been running without interruption for millions of years. What this means is that the manatee is not, in a strict sense, eating alone. It carries within it a vast and ancient community of organisms whose entire existence is organized around the same daily task, making sense of plants. There is something worth pausing on here in the relationship between the manatee's digestion and that of the elephant. These two animals are not closely related in the way that, say, a dolphin and a whale are closely related. But they share a common ancestor in the deep past, and the traces of that ancestry appear in unexpected places. The hindgut fermentation system, the prehensile lip and the dexterous trunk, the dense bones, the long lifespan, the social memory organized around learned roots and reliable places. The manatee and the elephant are, in their separate ways, large animals that have solved the same problem, sustaining enormous mass on plant material, using tools inherited from the same distant source. One took to land, one took to water. Both carried the old chemistry with them. There is a final piece of this arithmetic that tends to be overlooked, and it is perhaps the quietest of all. The manatee's metabolic rate is low for a mammal of its size, not simply because it moves slowly. The underlying rate at which its cells burn fuel, the baseline idle of the whole system, appears to be reduced relative to what you would predict for a warm-blooded animal of comparable mass. This is not a flaw. It is, again, a strategy. A lower metabolic rate means the body asks less of its fuel source at every moment. The demands are reduced at the cellular level, not just the behavioral one. This is part of why manatees can tolerate periods of food scarcity that would stress a metabolically faster animal far more quickly. It is part of why they can spend time resting, drifting, simply existing in warm water without any urgent need to feed every waking hour. The whole system is tuned for patience. Low heat loss through warm water, low locomotion cost through slow movement, high extraction efficiency through long gut and microbial partnership, low baseline demand through reduced metabolic rate. Each adaptation reinforces the others. Together, They make the improbable possible. A mammal the size of a small car, sustained entirely by the plants growing quietly on the floor of warm, shallow water. It is worth sitting with that image for a moment, not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a thing that simply exists. Somewhere right now, in a river in Florida, or a coastal lagoon in Brazil, or a warm estuary in West Africa, a manatee is moving slowly over a bed of aquatic grass. It is not hurrying. It has no reason to hurry. Its body knows exactly what it needs, and the water around it, if the season is right, contains more than enough of it. The animal reaches its lip toward the plants, grasps, pulls, chews. The long gut begins its patient work. The microbial communities stir. The slow clock of a low metabolism life continues to turn. 150 pounds of plants will become, by the end of the day, a manatee that is still here, still warm, still moving at 3 miles an hour through water that holds it without effort. That is not a small thing. That is one of the more remarkable negotiations between a body and a world that the history of life has produced. The world offered plants and warmth. The body said, "That is enough." And then it built, over millions of years, all the quiet machinery required to make it true. The plants sway, the water is warm, the animal feeds and drifts and feeds again. And the whole arrangement continues as it has for a very long time, without any need for drama at all. A plant-eating giant is already surprising, but the calmest miracle may be the way it rises and sinks through its day, almost without seeming to disturb it. A manatee can hold its breath for up to 20 minutes, not because it is hiding, not because it is fleeing, not because anything is chasing it. It holds its breath simply because it is doing something else, grazing, resting, drifting slowly along the bottom, and the surface will still be there when it is ready. That patience, applied to something as urgent as breathing, is its own kind of wonder. Most mammals treat breath as a constant. We breathe without thinking dozens of times a minute, and the body demands it. But marine mammals have learned, across millions of years of slow evolutionary pressure, to stretch that interval, to hold the need at arm's length, to place a long, quiet gap between one breath and the next. For manatees, that gap can last the better part of half an hour. What makes this possible is not simply that manatees have large lungs, though they do. It is how those lungs are arranged. In most mammals, the lungs sit bunched in the upper chest, 2 lobes tucked behind the ribs. In manatees, the lungs are long and flat, running nearly the full length of the body from shoulder to hip, one on each side. They extend horizontally, like 2 wide, thin cushions laid along the animal's flanks. This unusual architecture does something that a conventional lung arrangement could not. It spreads buoyancy evenly along the entire body rather than concentrating it at one end. That matters enormously in the water. An animal with lungs only in its chest would tend to float head up, tail down. A manatee, with its lungs distributed along its full length, can hover in a nearly horizontal position, parallel to the bottom, perfectly balanced, without constant muscular effort to stay that way. The lungs are not just for breathing, they are also for floating. And the manatee controls that float with remarkable precision. By adjusting how full or empty those long lungs are, breathing in more deeply, exhaling partially, holding a particular volume of air, a manatee can rise or sink through the water column, almost without moving. It does not need to stroke its paddle tail to ascend. It does not need to angle its body or fight the water. It simply changes the air inside itself and the water responds. This is called hydrostatic buoyancy control, and it is the same principle that governs how a submarine rises and dives, adjusting internal volume to change the ratio of weight to displacement. The Manatee arrived at this solution long before any engineer drew a diagram. In other words, the Manatee does not swim to the surface so much as it simply allows itself to rise. The physics do the work. The animal provides only the intention. Watch a manatee breathe, and you begin to understand how unhurried the whole exchange is. The snout breaks the surface first. The nostrils, two small valves at the very tip of the rounded muzzle, open, and the manatee exhales. The breath leaves quickly, a brief, soft exhalation, almost imperceptible. Then, the inhalation, which takes only a second or two, and then the nostrils close again, sealed tight by muscular valves that keep water out without any conscious effort. The snout slides back beneath the surface. The animal descends. The whole event can take less than 3 seconds. For something the size of a large dining table, this is a startlingly quiet transaction. No drama, no visible effort, no splash. The surface barely registers it. The manatee barely registers it. It is simply part of the rhythm of the day, as unremarkable as a sleeping person drawing breath in the dark. That comparison is not accidental, because manatees do sleep, genuinely, deeply in the water. They sleep at the surface, floating just beneath it, rising to breathe without waking. They sleep on the bottom, lying still in shallow water, surfacing every few minutes before settling back down. They can sleep vertically, hovering in the water column with their bodies hanging loose and their eyes closed, rising and sinking gently with each breath. This is called unihemispheric sleep in some marine mammals, a condition where one half of the brain rests while the other remains alert enough to manage basic functions. Whether manatees sleep this way, or whether they experience something closer to full unconscious rest, is not entirely settled. What is known is that they do sleep, and that breathing happens anyway, managed by some quiet, automatic layer of awareness that persists even when the rest of the mind has gone still. The body breathes while the mind rests. The surface is always there. The animal rises, takes air, and returns to sleep without the boundary between the two states ever becoming sharp. There is something almost architectural about this arrangement. The manatee does not experience breath as an interruption. Breath is simply woven into the structure of the day, as regular and unremarkable as the current, as the light shifting through the water above. Feeding and breathing alternate without conflict. Sleep and breathing coexist without friction. The need for air has been fitted so smoothly into the life of the animal that it no longer reads as urgency. This is one of the quieter triumphs of marine mammal evolution. The ancestors of manatees were land animals, warm-blooded, air-breathing, walking on solid ground. When that lineage turned toward the water, it brought its lungs with it. It could not leave them behind. And so the challenge over millions of years was not to stop needing air, but to make that need compatible with a life spent beneath the surface. The manatee solved this not by needing less air, but by needing it less often, and by arranging its body so that the return to the surface required almost nothing. The breath efficiency of a manatee is also remarkable. When a manatee exhales and inhales, it replaces a very high percentage of the air in its lungs. Estimates suggest somewhere between 80 and 90% of the total lung volume is exchanged in a single breath. In humans, a typical breath replaces only about 15%. Even a deep breath replaces perhaps 70%. This means the manatee takes in an enormous amount of fresh oxygen with every visit to the surface. It loads up efficiently, then descends. The oxygen is carried in the blood and in the muscles, hemoglobin and myoglobin both holding reserves, and drawn down slowly over the course of the dive. That is why 20 minutes is possible. Not because the manatee uses air slowly in the way a sleeping person might, but because it loaded so much at the start and its body knows how to ration what it carries. The blood has a role in this too, though a quieter one. Manatees, like other marine mammals, have blood that is rich in hemoglobin, the protein that carries oxygen through the body. More hemoglobin means more oxygen can be transported per unit of blood. The blood becomes, in a sense, a denser fuel. The muscles themselves are also rich in myoglobin, a related protein that stores oxygen directly in muscle tissue. This is why the flesh of many marine mammals is very dark. The myoglobin gives it a deep, almost brown-red color. The body is a storage system. The lungs, the blood, the muscles, all of them holding oxygen in different forms, releasing it at different rates, extending the time between one breath and the next. And all of it operates without the manatee thinking about it at all. There is something worth sitting with in that. We carry our breathing with us consciously. We feel the need arrive. We feel the relief of the inhale. For a manatee, that whole negotiation has been moved somewhere deeper, somewhere below the level of experience. The animal does not feel the countdown. It does not feel the pressure building. It simply rises when it is time to rise, and the time is always right. Imagine the quality of stillness that creates. A body in the water, feeding or resting or drifting, untroubled by the clock of its own survival. Not because it has no needs. It has the same fundamental needs as any air-breathing creature. But because those needs have been woven so smoothly into the texture of its life that they no longer feel like demands. This is what millions of years of refinement looks like. Not dramatic transformation, not a radical departure from what the body was. Just a slow, patient adjustment of timing, proportion and placement until breath and water and sleep and feeding all find their way into the same unhurried rhythm. The manatee surfaces and the nostrils open. The air moves in. The nostrils close. The animal descends again, and the water settles over the place where it was, and the surface is smooth again. Somewhere below, the body continues its slow work. The lungs hold what they were given. The blood carries its cargo. The muscles do their quiet storing. And the animal drifts, or grazes, or rests, or simply exists in the warm and shallow water, alive, breathing in its way, held between the surface and the bottom in a kind of effortless suspension. The surface is always there. The breath will come when it is needed. There is no urgency in that knowledge. There is only the long, settled certainty of a body that has learned, over an immense span of time, to trust the rhythm it was made for. And hidden inside that calm face is one of the strangest solutions any mammal has found to the simple problem of eating every day. Most mammals grow 2 sets of teeth in a lifetime. Baby teeth arrive first, small and temporary. Then adult teeth push through, and that is the end of the supply. Whatever damage accumulates after that, wear, cracks, loss, stays. There is no further replacement. The system is fixed, and for most mammals it is enough. Their teeth outlast them. For the manatee, it would not be enough. A manatee can live 60 years or more, and for most of those years, it will spend between 6 and 8 hours every single day chewing. Not occasionally, not seasonally. Every day, for decades, grinding tough aquatic plants against its molars until those plants become something the body can use. The math of that is staggering if you let yourself sit with it. 6 hours a day, every day, for 60 years. That is a life measured in meals, and the teeth must somehow survive it. Seagrass is not soft. It is fibrous and silica-laden, which means it contains tiny particles of what is essentially glass, microscopic structures the plant uses for support and defense. Every mouthful carries that abrasion. Over time, over years, over decades of daily grinding, even the hardest tooth surface wears down. And the manatee does not eat only seagrass. It feeds in shallow, sandy habitats where sediment coats everything, where the plants come up from the bottom with silt still clinging to the roots and blades. Every bite includes a little grit. Every meal is, in a small way, eating the bottom of the world. 2 sets of teeth would be gone within a decade. So the manatee does something no other fully aquatic mammal does, and very few mammals of any kind do. It grows teeth continuously throughout its entire life. Not like a shark, which regrows the same tooth in the same place. Not like a rodent, which grows a single pair of incisors that keep extending from the root. The manatee grows new molars at the back of its jaw, and those molars move forward, slowly, over months and years, replacing the ones at the front as those older teeth wear down and eventually fall out. Forward, always forward. The teeth do not simply appear and stay, they migrate. This is called Polyphyodonty in the technical sense, but the more useful word is conveyor. Picture a slow conveyor belt running the length of the jaw, loaded with molars. New ones form at the back and begin their long journey toward the front. The ones already in use are grinding away in the middle. And at the very front, the oldest teeth, worn nearly smooth, reduced to small remnants of what they once were, loosen and drop away into the water, into the mud, into the seagrass beds where the manatee was feeding. The belt keeps moving. It never stops. At any given moment, a manatee has between 6 and 8 teeth in use in each jaw, with more forming behind them. The total count in use at once is modest, but the total number of teeth a manatee will grow and lose across a lifetime is far larger than that modest number suggests. Dozens of molars will form, migrate, serve their purpose, and disappear before a manatee reaches old age. The teeth are not permanent equipment. They are more like a supply, renewable, patient, and precisely calibrated to the demands of the life being lived. What makes this so quietly astonishing is how precisely it fits the problem. Not just the fact of continuous replacement, but the direction of it. Forward. The teeth wear at the front, where the oldest ones are doing the most work, and the fresh ones arrive from behind to take their place. There is a logic to it that feels almost designed, though of course it was not designed. It was arrived at slowly through the long pressure of a life spent grinding abrasive plants in sandy water, generation after generation, until the jaw that could keep producing teeth was the jaw that survived. Evolution is not a plan. It is a kind of patient accumulation of what works. And what works here is a mouth that restocks itself. Elephants do something similar. This is not coincidence. Manatees and elephants share a common ancestor, a distant one, ancient and long gone, but real. And both lineages arrived at continuous molar replacement through that shared inheritance and the shared pressure of a life spent eating tough vegetation. The elephant's teeth also move forward through the jaw. The elephant also loses worn molars from the front and grows new ones from the back. When the last set of an elephant's teeth finally wears out, the animal can no longer eat properly, and this is often what ends a long life. The manatee's system, by contrast, seems to have no known limit. Researchers have not yet found an age at which the teeth stop forming. The supply, as far as anyone can determine, continues. The conveyor keeps moving. It is as though the manatee has solved, at least in part, the problem that eventually claims the elephant, and done so quietly, inside a jaw that from the outside gives no indication of what is happening within it. That jaw is worth pausing on. The manatee's face is not built for precision. There are no sharp front teeth for cutting or tearing. The lips do that work instead. Flexible, muscular, split into two independent halves that move separately and grip with surprising dexterity. The lips pull vegetation toward the mouth, position it, and pass it back to the molars, which are the real workers. The molars are broad and ridged, suited for crushing and grinding rather than slicing. They are built for endurance, not speed. They are the tools of a life measured in hours of slow work rather than moments of quick capture. And the teeth themselves, when you look at them, are not dramatic. They are not tusks. They are not fangs. They are modest, rounded molars that do exactly what they need to do and nothing more. Their strangeness is entirely hidden, entirely interior. You would not know, watching a manatee graze, that inside that calm and unhurried face, a slow mechanical process is continuously underway. New teeth forming, old ones traveling, worn ones loosening and falling away. The whole jaw is quietly in motion, even when the manatee is still. There is something worth sitting with in that. The most remarkable thing about the manatee's teeth is not visible from the outside. It is not a feature that announces itself. It is a solution to a problem, a long, slow, patient problem that operates entirely out of sight, in the dark interior of a body that has been chewing its way through seagrass for 60 years. Most of what keeps a large animal alive is like that. Hidden, interior, working without any need for acknowledgement. The grit in the water does its damage slowly. The teeth absorb that damage, serve their time, and yield. New ones arrive. The animal continues grazing, continues drifting, continues surfacing and descending in the warm, shallow water it has always preferred. The teeth are not the story the manatee tells from the outside. They are the infrastructure beneath the story, the quiet mechanism that makes the long, unhurried life possible. And the long life is long. A manatee that reaches 60 years will have grown and shed more teeth than most mammals will ever possess. It will have eaten, in that time, a mass of vegetation difficult to fully imagine. Tons of seagrass, water hyacinth, algae, the slow, continuous harvest of a life spent hovering close to the bottom. And through all of it, the jaw will have kept replenishing itself, quietly, without fanfare, without any sign from the outside that anything unusual was happening at all. That is what the conveyor does. It runs. It does not stop. It does not ask to be noticed. And the manatee, unhurried and steady in the warm water, simply continues. But a body and its strange tools only matter because of the life they make possible. And most of that life is wonderfully simple. A manatee's day is largely one thing. It is finding plants, eating them, moving to find more, and resting when rest is needed. There is no drama in this. There is no strategy, no chase, no sudden reversal of fortune. What there is instead is something quieter and, in its own way, more absorbing. The long, patient accumulation of enough. Most of a manatee's waking hours are spent grazing. Estimates vary, but somewhere between 6 and 8 hours each day is given over entirely to feeding, and that time is not rushed. The manatee moves through seagrass beds and river vegetation at a pace that barely registers as movement at all. A slow drift forward, a pause, a bite, another drift. Watching it from above, you might think the animal was simply resting in place. But it is working. Steadily, continuously, almost meditatively, it is doing the most essential thing a body can do. That is worth sitting with for a moment. 6 to 8 hours of grazing every day to sustain a body that weighs as much as a small car. Not because the manatee is inefficient, but because the math of herbivory at that scale demands it. The plants are there. The time is there. The body is shaped for exactly this. And so the manatee grazes, and the day moves around it, and the water shifts from morning light to afternoon shadow, and the animal continues. The way it feeds is precise in ways that are easy to miss. The flexible lips, divided, mobile, capable of grasping and directing, do most of the selection work. A manatee does not simply press its face into a seagrass bed and consume everything in reach. It chooses. The lips sort through what is available, closing around preferred stems, moving past less palatable material, pulling with a grip that is surprisingly deliberate for something that looks so soft. The whiskers around the mouth and across the face are reading the environment the whole time, sensing texture, density, the resistance of a plant against the current, the difference between a stem that is young and tender and one that has grown too tough to bother with. This is feeding as a form of attention. The manatee is not distracted while it eats. It is entirely present to the act, responding to minute differences in what the water offers, making continuous small decisions about where to move next and what to take. That kind of sustained tactile focus is something we might recognize in ourselves when we are doing something we know well. A practiced, quiet competence that does not announce itself. The preferred foods vary by habitat and season. In coastal and estuarine areas, seagrasses are the foundation. Turtle grass, manatee grass, shoal grass, others. In freshwater rivers and springs, they shift toward aquatic plants that grow in slower, calmer water. Water hyacinth, hydrilla, various submerged and floating vegetation. They will also take algae when it is available, and occasionally some incidental invertebrate matter if it happens to be attached to a plant, though they are not hunting for it. The diet is almost entirely plant material, and the manatee navigates toward it with a kind of unhurried expertise, built from a lifetime of knowing what grows where. What this means in practice is that a manatee's day is also a kind of map reading. It knows, in some functional sense, where the good patches are. It knows the direction of the current, the depth of the water, the locations of the beds it has visited before. The day's grazing is not random wandering. It is a slow traverse of familiar ground, a habitual route through a landscape the animal has learned through repeated, careful attention over years. Manatees typically graze in the shallower portions of their habitat, where light can penetrate far enough to support plant growth. Seagrass needs sunlight to photosynthesize, which means it grows where the water is clear and not too deep. Often in water that comes only to the manatee's back, sometimes shallower. The animal moves along the bottom or just above it, its paddle-like tail making gentle undulations, its body nearly horizontal, its face inclined slightly downward toward the grass. From above, it is a slow, dark shape moving through green. From the side, it is almost still. The grazing itself leaves traces. A manatee feeding through a seagrass bed creates what researchers call feeding trails. Long, narrow clearings in the vegetation where the grass has been cropped close to the sediment. These trails are not damage in any simple sense. Seagrass, like most grasses, regrows from its roots and rhizomes, and regular cropping by large herbivores can stimulate new growth, encouraging younger, more nutritious shoots to replace older, tougher material. The manatee is not merely consuming the meadow. It is, in some ways, tending it. This is one of those ecological relationships that rewards slower thinking. An animal that eats a habitat might seem at first like a threat to it. But a large herbivore that has grazed the same meadows for thousands of generations has co-evolved with those plants in ways that are not immediately obvious. The grass has grown to tolerate and perhaps even benefit from this kind of disturbance. The manatee has shaped its behavior around the availability of the grass. The two are in a kind of conversation that has been going on far longer than any human record of it. The feeding trails are not scars. They are evidence of a relationship. Between grazing bouts, there are pauses. A manatee will stop and rest at the surface or just below it, breathing in its slow rhythm, allowing the work of digestion to continue. These pauses are not long. Perhaps a few minutes, perhaps less, before the animal drifts forward again and resumes. The day is not divided into clear meals and clear rests the way a predator's day might be. It is more continuous than that, more woven together, with feeding and breathing and slow movement forming a single unhurried pattern rather than a sequence of distinct activities. The pace of travel during a grazing day is gentle. Manatees typically move at 1 to 2 miles per hour when foraging, sometimes slower. They are not trying to cover ground. They are trying to cover plants. The difference matters because it means the animal is not oriented toward a destination so much as toward a quality of attention, staying in the places where the vegetation is dense and available, following the contours of the meadow rather than moving through it. In rivers, the grazing takes on a slightly different character. The current has more influence, and the plants grow differently. Some floating, some rooted along the banks, some reaching upward from a silted bottom. A manatee in a river will sometimes feed at the surface, pulling in floating vegetation with those flexible lips, or graze along the river's edge where aquatic plants grow thickly in the shallower water near shore. The river habitat is narrower and more channeled than an open bay, and the manatee moves through it with the same unhurried competence, reading the water, following the food. What is striking, watching all of this, is how little the manatee seems to disturb the world it moves through. Fish drift aside and return. Turtles continue their own slow business nearby. The water closes behind the manatee as though it had not passed. For an animal of its size, it occupies its habitat with remarkable quietness, not hiding, not threatening, simply present in the way that a large familiar thing can be present without demanding attention. There is something in this that shifts how the day feels as a concept. For most predators, a day is structured around waiting and then sudden action, the long stillness before the strike, the chase, the catch, the rest that follows effort. For the manatee, the day has no such structure. There is no climax, no moment of decision, no test of speed or reflexes. There is only the slow movement through green water, the continuous small work of eating, the steady rhythm of breath, the gradual accumulation of enough to sustain a body through the night and into the next morning. This is not a lesser kind of day. It is a different architecture of living, one built around persistence rather than intensity, around thoroughness rather than speed. The manatee does not need to win anything. It simply needs to continue, and it is very, very good at continuing. By late afternoon, if the animal has grazed well, it may move toward deeper water to rest more fully, sinking toward the bottom, hovering just above the sediment, breathing in long, slow intervals at the surface before descending again. The day's work is not dramatically complete. It simply fades the way light fades in shallow water, gradually, evenly, without a clear moment where one thing ends and another begins. The seagrass meadow continues after the manatee has moved on. The feeding trails are there, narrow and pale against the darker surrounding grass. The water settles. Small fish return to the cleared areas, finding the exposed sediment worth investigating. The meadow is slightly different than it was this morning. Grazed, stirred, touched, and it will grow back into itself over the coming days, and the manatee will return, and the same slow exchange will happen again. This is the long day of grazing, not extraordinary in any single moment, extraordinary only in its totality, in the fact that it repeats and repeats and repeats for decades across thousands of mornings and thousands of meadows, a large and gentle animal doing the quiet work of being alive in warm water, one mouthful of grass at a time. And within that slow routine, one relationship matters more than any other. A manatee calf is born underwater. It arrives into warm, shallow water, the same kind of water its mother has always preferred, and within minutes, it is breathing at the surface for the first time. It weighs somewhere between 30 and 60 pounds at birth, which sounds large until you consider that its mother may weigh 10 times that. It is enormous and helpless at once. It knows almost nothing yet, and it will spend the next 1 to 2 years learning nearly everything it needs to know from a single source: the mother. From the first hours of life, the calf stays close. Not occasionally close, constantly close. It swims beside her, drafts in her wake, surfaces when she surfaces, and rests when she rests. The two move through the water as though connected by something that cannot be seen. And in a sense, they are. The bond between a manatee mother and her calf is not incidental to manatee life. It is the central fact of it. Everything the calf will eventually know: where to find warm water, which seagrass beds to visit in which season, which river mouths open into safety, which routes to travel when the temperature drops. All of it will pass through this relationship, slowly, over months and months of shared experience. That is not metaphor. It is how manatees learn. There is no school for manatees. There is no group of elders, no communal teaching, no hierarchy of experienced animals demonstrating skills to the young. Manatees are not highly social in the way that dolphins or elephants are. They gather, sometimes loosely, near warm springs or in feeding areas. But these are associations of convenience rather than structure. The deep social architecture of manatee life is built from one unit only: the mother and her calf, together in the water for the full span of early learning. What the calf receives from this arrangement is not instruction in the human sense. The mother does not demonstrate and wait for the calf to copy. She simply lives her life, and the calf lives it alongside her. She grazes, and the calf watches, and eventually the calf grazes too. She surfaces to breathe on her slow, unhurried schedule, and the calf learns that rhythm by sharing it. She turns toward a particular spring as the water cools in autumn, following a route she has traveled before, and the calf travels it with her, memorizing, in some way that is still not fully understood, the geography of that journey. The route enters the calf's body not as a lesson, but as an experience, repeated until it becomes familiar and eventually becomes knowledge. This is one of the quieter forms of learning that exists. It requires patience on both sides. The mother does not rush, does not simplify, does not modify her behavior to accommodate the calf's inexperience. She moves through her world at her own pace, and the calf is carried along by proximity, by attention, by the simple fact of being there. Over time, being there becomes knowing how. The nursing itself happens underwater. The calf feeds from mammary glands located near the mother's armpits, or rather, near the base of her front flippers, in the area that corresponds to the armpit in terrestrial mammals. The calf approaches from below or beside, and nurses briefly, surfacing between feeds as it needs to breathe. These nursing sessions continue for months, sometimes for most of the calf's first year, even as the calf begins to graze on plants as well. Milk and seagrass overlap for a long time. The transition from one to the other is gradual, unhurried, dictated more by the calf's development than by any fixed schedule. There is something in that gradual weaning that reflects the whole shape of manatee life. Nothing is abrupt. Nothing is forced. The calf moves from milk to grass the way a river moves from narrow to wide, not at a single point, but across a long stretch of change that is hard to see while it is happening. The mother is present throughout that stretch. She is still there when the calf has been grazing independently for months. She is still there when the calf can surface and dive and rest on its own. The separation, when it finally comes, tends to happen before the mother's next calf is born. But it happens slowly, like most things in manatee life. What the calf carries away from this relationship is something that researchers have tried to study carefully because it has real consequences for survival. Manatees in Florida, for instance, tend to return to the same warm water refuges in winter, the same springs, the same power plant discharge areas, year after year. Individual animals have been documented returning to the same sites across decades. And when researchers have examined the patterns, they find that calves tend to use the same refuges their mothers used. The geography of safety is not discovered independently. It is inherited, passed from mother to calf through the years they spend traveling together. This means that when a mother manatee dies, from a boat strike, from cold stress, from entanglement, what dies with her is not only an individual animal. What dies is a map. The routes she knew, the springs she had found reliable, the estuaries she trusted in certain seasons. That knowledge does not exist anywhere else. It was never written down. It was carried only in her body and in the body of any calf that had traveled with her long enough to absorb it. When she is gone, that calf must rebuild the map alone, or find its way by chance, or follow other animals who happen to be going somewhere useful. The loss is not only biological, it is informational. It is the quiet erasure of a kind of memory that took years to accumulate. That is the weight of what a mother carries beyond her calf's physical needs. She carries a landscape. She carries a history of safe water. She carries the accumulated knowledge of how to survive in a particular place through particular seasons, and she transfers it not through language or demonstration, but through the slow, patient act of living alongside someone who is paying attention. Calves do pay attention. Their sensory world, as we have seen, is rich with tactile information. Their whiskers sensitive enough to read the texture of water as it moves. They are aware of their mothers at close range in ways that may involve sound, touch, and the subtle pressure changes that come from another large body moving nearby. When the mother surfaces, the calf surfaces. When she slows, the calf slows. When she turns, the calf turns. The attunement between them is continuous and physical, a kind of conversation conducted entirely through movement and proximity. Occasionally, calves will approach other manatees, adults resting near springs, or loose aggregations of animals gathered in warm water. These interactions are usually brief and gentle. Manatees are not aggressive toward young animals. A calf that approaches a resting adult is tolerated, sometimes briefly touched, sometimes ignored. But the mother remains the anchor. The calf returns. The wider world is interesting, but the relationship is home. There is tenderness in this that resists easy description. It is not the dramatic tenderness of a whale breaching alongside its calf, or the visible playfulness of dolphin families at the surface. It is quieter than that. A manatee mother and calf resting together at the bottom of a shallow spring, their bodies nearly touching, both of them perfectly still. That is what manatee tenderness looks like. It looks like closeness without motion. It looks like two animals who have been in each other's company long enough that nearness itself has become a kind of language. The calf, in these early months and years, is learning not only where to go and what to eat. It is learning what safety feels like. It is learning that certain water is warm and certain water is cold, and that the body knows the difference and should be listened to. It is learning the rhythm of tides, the seasonal changes in salinity near river mouths, the way seagrass beds shift with the season. It is learning all of this the way any young animal learns the most important things. Not in concentrated lessons, but spread across ordinary days, absorbed through the texture of experience, deposited quietly into memory by the simple repetition of being alive in a particular place. By the time the separation comes, the calf is not a different animal than it was at birth. It is a continuation of the same animal, but fuller now. It carries more. The warm springs it knows are not just locations. They are feelings, associated with the ease of warmth after cold, with the presence of its mother, with the particular quality of the water and the light. The seagrass beds it has grazed are not just food sources. They are places it has been, places it has returned to, places that have become part of its interior geography in a way that is not easily separated from memory and association. This is what the mother has given. Not just survival skills in the narrow sense, but a relationship to place. A sense of where in the world safety lives. A body that knows before the mind has finished deciding which direction to turn when the temperature drops and the season shifts. It is a slow gift given over years, received without ceremony and carried for a lifetime. The mother does not know she is teaching. The calf does not know it is learning. And yet the knowledge moves from one body to another through the quiet medium of shared days and shared water, and the unremarkable fact of being, for a long time, close. The calf will eventually travel its own routes, visit its own springs, graze its own beds. It will live its own long, unhurried life in the warm shallows. But somewhere in the way it moves, in the places it trusts, in the routes it follows without quite knowing why, the mother will still be there, quiet and complete, carried forward in the only way that knowledge, in the end, has ever truly traveled. Not in books, not in signals, in bodies, in memory, in the patient accumulation of days spent paying attention to someone who already knew the way. A manatee does not hurry across its world, but it knows exactly what kind of world it needs. That knowing is not abstract. It is not a decision made in the way we make decisions, weighing options and choosing a direction. It is older than that. It is written into the body itself, in the way that cold water tightens the skin, in the way that warmth draws a heavy animal toward it, the way gravity draws water downhill. The manatee moves through its world the way a river moves through a landscape, not because it has planned a route, but because the shape of things guides it and the body knows how to follow. Temperature is the first guide. For a large, warm-blooded animal living in water, heat is always leaving the body, always drifting outward into the surrounding cold. A manatee has very little insulating blubber compared to other marine mammals of similar size. It cannot manufacture warmth the way a seal can, or retain it the way a whale does behind thick layers of fat. It must find warmth the way a plant finds sunlight, by moving toward it, by positioning itself within it, by staying close to its source. That is not a weakness. It is simply a different kind of relationship with the world's thermal geography, one that has shaped every migration, every seasonal rhythm, every choice of where to rest. When water temperatures drop below about 20 degrees Celsius, manatees begin to suffer. Their muscles slow, their digestion falters. They become lethargic in a way that is not the comfortable slowness of a well-fed animal at rest, but the dangerous stillness of a body losing its capacity to function. Cold stress, as it is called, can kill a manatee that cannot find warmer water in time. And so the animal moves, following coastlines and rivers and the memory of places where warmth has been before. In Florida, that memory leads to springs. There are places along Florida's rivers where groundwater rises to the surface from deep underground aquifers, and that water arrives at a nearly constant temperature year-round, around 20 degrees Celsius, regardless of what the air or the coastal ocean is doing above. In winter, when the Gulf cools, and the ocean along the Atlantic coast drops to temperatures that would endanger a manatee, these springs remain steady, warm, clear, gently flowing, and predictable. Manatees have known about them for a very long time. What draws them there is not a map. It is not a decision made by reasoning through the problem of winter. It is a learned route, passed from mother to calf across generations, reinforced by the body's own memory of warmth found and cold avoided. A young manatee that has wintered with its mother at a spring will return to that spring in subsequent years, not because it was told to, but because the route is now part of what it knows. The landscape has been written into its body, one migration at a time. At peak winter gatherings, hundreds of manatees may congregate at a single warm spring. They settle into the outflow together, moving slowly through the clear water, resting along the sandy bottom, drifting against one another in a way that is unhurried and almost social. They are not cooperating in the way that dolphins cooperate, or communicating in complex, coordinated ways. They are simply gathered around the same warmth, the way all warm things gather when the world grows cold. There is something in that image that is both very simple and very old. The springs are not feeding grounds. The vegetation there is often sparse, scoured by the regular congregation of heavy animals, and the manatees that winter at springs arrive from more productive feeding areas and will return to them when the water warms again. The spring is a refuge, not a pantry. What it offers is safety from cold, and the manatee's body knows the difference between the two kinds of need, and knows when each one is the more urgent. When winter loosens, the movement reverses. Manatees fan outward from the springs along river corridors, following warming water back toward the coast, spreading through estuaries and bays and open coastal waters as the season allows. This is the pattern of a life calibrated to temperature. A contraction toward warmth in cold months, an expansion into abundance when warmth returns. The whole range of the animal breathes in and out with the seasons, like a slow tide of large grey bodies moving through the landscape. Estuaries are where much of this life unfolds. An estuary is a place where a river meets the sea, where fresh water and salt water mix and shift with the tides, where salinity changes by the hour, and the bottom is layered with sediment carried down from inland. These are productive places. The nutrients from the land enrich the water, seagrass beds grow dense in the shallows, and the mixing of different water types creates conditions that many species depend on for breeding, nursery habitat, and feeding. Manatees are among those species, and they are well suited to the variability of estuarine life. Unlike most marine mammals, manatees move freely between fresh and salt water. Their kidneys adjust. Their bodies handle the transition without apparent difficulty, crossing from river to bay to open coast and back again as conditions and food availability shift. This flexibility is not incidental. It is one of the things that makes the manatee so well fitted to the geography of coastal edges, to the places where the land and sea are still negotiating with each other, where the world is neither one thing nor the other. Lagoons are another kind of home. Shallow, sheltered, protected from open ocean swells by barrier islands or sandbars, lagoons hold warm water and grow dense beds of seagrass in their sandy shallows. Florida's Indian River Lagoon, for example, has been a critical manatee habitat for as long as records exist, and likely long before that. The shelter matters as much as the food. Manatees are not built for rough water. They do not fight currents or push through heavy surf. They choose the path of least resistance, the quieter channel, the more sheltered bay, the water that asks the least of a body already working hard, simply to stay warm and fed. That preference for shelter shapes the geography of where manatees are found in ways that go beyond temperature and food. A lagoon offers protection from the open ocean's unpredictability. A river offers a corridor through the landscape that a manatee can navigate with the confidence of something that has been there before. The shallow coastal flat offers visibility, vegetation, and the ability to rest on the bottom without descending to depths that would require significant effort to return from. Every choice of habitat is a choice of ease over difficulty, of abundance over scarcity, of warmth over cold. The manatee is not lazy. It is simply very good at understanding what its body needs and very good at finding it. The whiskers play a role here too. The manatee's face is covered in coarse, sensitive hairs, and the body carries additional sensory hairs across much of its surface. These hairs detect water movement, pressure changes, and the subtle hydrodynamic signatures of currents, channels, and obstacles. A manatee moving through murky water is not navigating blind. It is reading the water itself, feeling the shape of the current, sensing the way flow changes near a riverbank or around a submerged structure. The landscape speaks to the body in the language of pressure and movement, and the body listens. This sensitivity may also help manatees navigate between fresh and salt water, sensing the gradients of salinity that mark the boundaries between different kinds of water. Where the river thins into brackish mixing zones, where the estuary opens toward the sea, where the spring's outflow meets the slower river water. All of these transitions are written in the water's physical properties, and the manatee moves through them with the quiet confidence of an animal that has learned to read what cannot be seen. Manatees also respond to vegetation density in ways that are not purely about hunger. Where seagrass is thick and continuous, manatees graze slowly and steadily, taking their time, covering relatively small areas over the course of a day. Where vegetation is patchy or sparse, they move more, ranging wider, spending more energy in transit. The landscape of food shapes the landscape of movement, and over time, the two become a kind of map, not drawn, not stored in words or images, but held in the body as a pattern of where effort has been rewarded before. What this creates across the life of a single manatee is something like a personal geography, a set of known places: the spring where winter is spent, the estuary where the seagrass is thick in spring, the lagoon where the water stays warm even in autumn, the river corridor that connects them all. This geography is not fixed. Storms alter coastlines. Seagrass beds shift and recover. Springs are shared with hundreds of other animals. But the underlying pattern, warmth, shelter, food, ease, remains the same. And the animal navigates toward it year after year with a kind of patient reliability that looks, from the outside, almost like contentment. There is something worth sitting with in that. An animal that large, moving through a landscape that complex, finding its way not through speed or aggression or elaborate social coordination, but through accumulated familiarity with a world it has learned to read. The manatee does not conquer its environment. It does not reshape it in dramatic ways or dominate other species or stake out territory with force. It moves through the landscape like something that belongs there, which is exactly what it is. The seagrass beds it grazes in will recover. The springs it winters at will continue flowing. The estuaries it passes through will carry its gentle passage and close again behind it, leaving almost nothing disturbed. This is not passivity. This is a very old and very particular way of living in a world, one that asks for warmth and shelter and enough food, and in return takes no more than it needs and leaves the rest intact. The manatee settles, finally, into the slow water of a familiar place. The light above is soft. The current is gentle. The seagrass sways in the mild flow of an outgoing tide. The body is heavy and the water holds it. There is no urgency. There is only the landscape and the body that knows it, and the quiet fact of being exactly where the world has always been. And once you have watched a manatee long enough, it becomes harder to think of slowness as emptiness. There is something happening inside that large, unhurried body. Something attentive. Something that has been accumulating information for years. About water temperature, about the position of warm springs, about the particular feel of a seagrass bed it has visited before. The manatee does not announce this. It does not perform awareness in any way we easily recognize. It simply continues, patient and present, in a way that begins to feel less like absence and more like a different kind of being awake. We tend to measure intelligence by speed, by problem-solving under pressure, by the clever trick, the escape, the sudden adaptation. These are the moments we notice, and so they have shaped what we think intelligence looks like. But the manatee offers a different model entirely. It offers attention without urgency, memory without display. A mind that has been shaped not by the need to outwit a predator or solve a puzzle, but by the long, quiet requirement of knowing where to go and how to get there and what the water will feel like when it arrives. That is a different kind of knowing. It is no less real. The manatee's skin is remarkable in a way that takes a moment to fully settle. Across its entire body, the face, the flippers, the barrel of its torso, there are sensory hairs. Not just the large, stiff whiskers around the mouth, which are exquisitely sensitive and well documented in their role during feeding, but smaller, finer hairs distributed across the whole animal, thousands of them, each one capable of detecting pressure, movement, vibration in the water. What this means is that a manatee does not only touch the world with its face, it feels the world with its entire surface. A slight current moving differently than expected. The pressure wave of something large passing nearby. The subtle difference between still water and water that is moving toward warmth. All of this arrives not as a single sensation, but as a kind of full-body conversation between the animal and the water it inhabits. The manatee is, in a sense, reading the water constantly, not with effort, but the way a hand resting on a table feels the vibration of footsteps without trying to. This is called lateral sensitivity in various forms across aquatic animals, but the distribution in manatees is unusual in its extent. The whole body listening, the whole surface of the animal engaged with what surrounds it. Imagine moving through the world like that, not seeing it, feeling it everywhere, all at once, as a continuous and nuanced conversation between skin and water. The mind that processes all of that input must be doing something, must be sorting, comparing, remembering, must be building a picture of the world from touch rather than sight, and navigating by it with a confidence that looks, from the outside, like simple drifting. It is not simple drifting. Sound matters to manatees in ways that are still being understood. They are not loud animals. They do not produce the long, complex songs of whales or the echolocating clicks of dolphins. But they do communicate. Mothers and calves use soft vocalizations, chirps, squeaks, quiet exchanges to stay in contact when they cannot see each other clearly in murky water. These sounds are not elaborate. They do not need to be. They carry what needs to be carried. I am here. I am close. Stay near. What is interesting is not the complexity of the sounds, but the fact of them. A manatee calf and its mother, separated by a few meters of cloudy water, calling quietly to each other, recognizing each other's voices, responding. This is not instinct operating blindly. This is communication between individuals who know each other, maintaining contact through a medium that would otherwise make them invisible to one another. The manatee's hearing is also unusual. They detect sound not only through their ears, but through the bones of their jaw and skull, which conduct vibration directly to the inner ear. They may perceive the low-frequency sounds of boats and water movement through their whole head in the same distributed way their skin perceives pressure. The body, again, as a listening instrument. Not one channel, but many. Not one point of contact with the world, but a whole, continuous surface of reception. What about memory? What does a manatee remember? We know, from research and from observation, that manatees return to the same locations year after year. The same warm springs in winter, the same feeding grounds in summer, the same routes between them, often following coastlines and river channels with a consistency that suggests something more than general tendency. These animals are navigating. They have internalized a map, and they carry it with them across years, across seasons, updating it as conditions change. A manatee that has learned a route as a calf, following its mother through familiar water, may travel that same route decades later. The map, once formed, persists. The memory is not fragile or short. It is durable in the way that only deeply useful things become durable. It has been reinforced by repetition, by the reliable satisfaction of warmth found where warmth was expected, of food found where food had been before. This is spatial memory, the same kind of memory that allows birds to return to nesting sites across thousands of miles, the same kind that allows elephants, and here the kinship is worth noting, however quietly, to remember the location of water sources across decades of drought. Memory shaped by the land, or in this case, by the water. Memory as a form of relationship with a particular place. The manatee does not simply move through the world. It knows the world. Specific stretches of river, specific openings where fresh water meets salt, specific temperatures at specific times of year. All of this held somewhere in a large, slow-moving body, available when needed, guiding each journey with a quiet certainty that looks, from the outside, like habit. But habit is just what memory looks like when it works perfectly. There is a question that is worth sitting with, without needing to answer it. What is it like to be a manatee? Not in the sense of what it does, or how its body functions, or what it eats, but what is the texture of that experience? What does the world feel like, arriving through thousands of sensory hairs? What does warm water feel like when you have spent weeks in cold water and finally, the temperature begins to change? What does the memory of a place feel like when the body begins to move toward it without conscious decision, guided by something older and deeper than thought? We cannot know. We are on the outside of that experience entirely. But the question itself is worth holding. Because the habit of assuming that minds like ours are the only minds that matter, that attention requires speed, that intelligence requires cleverness, that awareness requires drama, is a habit that narrows the world considerably. The manatee does not solve puzzles. It does not use tools. It does not demonstrate the kind of cognition that fills scientific papers on animal intelligence. And yet, it navigates, remembers, communicates, responds, and moves through a complex and changing world with a reliability that only a rich inner life can support. The simplicity is on the surface. Beneath it, something is always working. Something is always attending. Calm attention is still attention. Slow knowing is still knowing. A mind shaped by a peaceful life is not a lesser mind. It is a mind calibrated to what that life requires. And what a manatee's life requires is subtle and demanding in its own way. The ability to read water through skin, to hear with bone, to carry a map of warm places across years of travel, to recognize a mother's voice in murky water, to know, without any visible calculation, that the warmth is in this direction, that the grass is deeper here, that this is the place to rest. All of that is happening inside a body that looks, from the outside, like it is simply floating. It is not simply floating. It is present in the fullest sense of the word. It is attending to the water, to the temperature, to the slow and continuous information that arrives at every surface of its body. It is, in its way, awake to the world in a manner that requires no performance, no urgency, no visible display of cleverness to confirm. The manatee is paying attention, quietly, completely, in the way that only a creature shaped by millions of years of patient, careful living has learned to do. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps that is more than enough. That quiet mind is also the latest expression of a very old experiment in how a mammal might live. The manatee's lineage reaches back more than 50 million years. That number is easy to say and almost impossible to feel, but it is worth trying. 50 million years ago, there were no grasslands on Earth as we know them. The Himalayas had not yet risen. The continents were still arranging themselves into something approaching their current shapes. And somewhere in that warmer, shallower world, a group of terrestrial mammals was doing something unusual. It was returning to the water. Not one group, several separately across different lineages. Whales and dolphins descended from land mammals. So did seals and sea lions and walruses. And so, in their own branch of that long experiment, did the Sirenians, the order to which the manatee belongs. What makes the Sirenian story strange and beautiful and worth sitting with is who their closest living relatives are. Not whales, not seals, elephants. The manatee and the elephant share a common ancestor more recently than either shares one with any other large mammal alive today. This is not a guess or an approximation. It is written in the structure of their cells, in the architecture of their bones, in the way their teeth move. The elephant's prehensile trunk and the manatee's flexible, sensing lips are distant expressions of the same evolutionary inheritance. The way elephant families move through landscape carrying knowledge, and the way manatee mothers pass migration routes and feeding grounds to their calves, may be expressions of the same ancient intelligence shaped differently by different worlds. That kinship is one of those facts that seems at first like a curiosity, a party trick of taxonomy, and then you sit with it longer, and it becomes something else entirely. What it means is this: the body that learned to wade through shallow, warm water, that grew large and slow and herbivorous, that developed dense bones and quiet habits, and a life organized around finding plants. That body is not an accident of the sea. It is a translation of something that was already there. The manatee carries in its rounded form and its patient appetite the echo of an animal that once walked on land. That is a strange thing to hold. The water remembers the land. The body remembers its earlier shape. The earliest sirenians were already semi-aquatic by the time the fossil record catches them, living in warm, shallow seas that covered parts of what is now the Caribbean, the Mediterranean, and the coasts of Africa. They were smaller then, and some still had hind limbs. Over millions of years, those limbs were lost. The body became more streamlined, though never sleek in the way of dolphins. It kept its roundness. It kept its heaviness. It retained the dense, compacted bones that work like ballast, keeping the animal perfectly weighted for hovering near the bottom without effort. What the early Sirenians found in those ancient warm seas was a resource that had never been fully exploited by a large mammal. The aquatic plants growing in the shallows, seagrasses, river grasses, algae, vast meadows of vegetation, slow to be eaten, easy to find, requiring no pursuit, just patience, just presence, just the willingness to be large and slow in a world that had room for large and slow. And so, the Sirenians stayed. While other lineages diversified into hunters, into speed, into the cold and the deep, the Sirenians remained in the shallows, in the warmth, eating plants, for 50 million years. That persistence is not stagnation. It is refinement. The manatee alive today is not a rough draft. It is the result of 50 million years of small improvements to a single, coherent way of being. Every tooth, every whisker, every loop of intestine is the product of an incalculable number of generations, each one living out its quiet life in warm water, each one contributing through survival and reproduction to the slow perfection of this form. There were other Sirenians, now gone. Stella's sea cow was the largest, a creature that may have reached 8 meters in length, grazing the cold kelp forests of the North Pacific. It was encountered by European sailors in 1741 and hunted to extinction within 27 years. That loss is its own kind of weight, but it also reminds us that the manatee is not the only answer its lineage found. It is one of the surviving answers, shaped by a particular set of conditions: warm, shallow, vegetated water in places where the sea meets the land. The dugong is the other surviving Sirenian, still living in the Indo-Pacific, still grazing seagrass beds in warm coastal waters. The manatee and the dugong diverged long ago, and yet they arrived at similar forms through similar pressures. The same warmth, the same plants, the same patient life. They are not identical. The dugong has a fluked tail like a dolphin's, where the manatee has a paddle. But they are recognizably kin, recognizably expressions of the same ancient answer. What that answer says, across 50 million years, is something like, this works. Not in the way that dramatic adaptations work, not the speed of the tuna, the depth of the sperm whale, the cold tolerance of the narwhal, but in a quieter way, a way that does not ask for much and therefore survives the loss of much. The manatee does not require abundant prey. It does not require exceptional speed. It requires warmth and plants and time. Time is the one thing evolution always has, and the manatee has learned to ask only for what the world can reliably provide. There is something in this that asks to be felt rather than analyzed. We live in a moment that prizes speed, novelty, adaptation as spectacle. We tend to think of evolution as a story of increasing complexity, of arms races and dramatic change, and sometimes it is. But the Sirenian story is a different kind of story. It is a story of finding something good and staying with it, of not being distracted by other possibilities, of becoming, over enormous spans of time, more and more completely what you already are. The manatee has not changed its fundamental way of being in 50 million years. The warm shallows have changed around it. Seas have risen and fallen, coastlines have shifted, the plants have evolved, the predators have come and gone. And still the manatee has grazed. Still it has surfaced to breathe. Still it has carried its calves through warm water and pressed its whiskered face into the grass. There is a kind of wisdom in that, not the wisdom of solving problems, the wisdom of having already solved them long ago and then simply continuing. Somewhere in the warm coastal waters of Florida, or the Amazon basin, or the Gulf of Mexico, a manatee is resting right now in the dark. Its body is nearly still. Its lungs hold a slow breath. Its whiskers are quiet against its face. Around it, the water moves in its ancient way, the same water that moved around the first Sirenians, in a different ocean, on a different coastline, under a different sky. The water remembers, or perhaps more accurately, the water does not forget. It holds the same warmth it has always held in the places where warmth was possible. It grows the same plants it has always grown where light reaches the bottom. And into that warmth, into those meadows, the manatee has returned, every generation for 50 million years, to graze and breathe and rest. That is what endurance looks like at the scale of a lineage. It does not look like triumph. It does not look like conquest. It looks like a large round animal hovering in shallow water, its paddle tail barely moving, its eyes half closed, its breath arriving and departing in its own slow time. It looks like something that has always been here and intends to continue. It looks like rest. And perhaps that is why humans have never quite known what to do with this animal, except turn it, again and again, into a symbol. Sailors saw them first, or so the stories say. Men who had been weeks at sea, moving through warm coastal water in the green haze of the tropics, their eyes scanning the surface for anything familiar. And there, just beneath the water, a shape, a large rounded body, a face that surfaced slowly, something that seemed, at a distance, to breathe. They called them sirens. Not because the manatee is beautiful in any conventional sense, not because it resembles the classical image of a sea nymph with any particular accuracy, but because the sailors were looking for something, and the manatee was there, and the human mind, especially a tired, sea-worn, homesick mind, is very good at finding what it needs in the shapes that are available to it. Christopher Columbus wrote of seeing 3 sirens in the waters off Hispaniola in 1493. He noted, with what sounds like mild disappointment, that they were not as beautiful as they had been described. He was almost certainly looking at manatees. And what strikes you about that record all these centuries later is not the confusion itself. It is the quality of the longing underneath it. The sirens were never about the manatees. They were about what people carried with them into unfamiliar water. The word manatee itself is thought to come from a word used by the Carib people of the Caribbean, meaning something close to breast or udder. Other languages gave them other names. Sea cow in many European tongues, lamantine in French, sea elephant in some early accounts, peixe boa in Portuguese, meaning oxfish. Each name is a small act of translation, a reaching for the familiar in the presence of the strange. None of them quite fit. None of them were meant to. That is the pattern, across centuries of human encounter with this animal. We arrive with categories already in hand, and the manatee does not fit any of them cleanly. It is not a fish. It is not a cow. It is not a mermaid. It is not a sea elephant. It is an old kind of creature, shaped by a different logic than the one we use to sort the world, and our names for it have always been a little approximate, a little borrowed, a little off. And yet, the names kept coming. The stories kept forming. Something about this animal kept pulling at the human imagination, even when the animal itself was doing almost nothing at all. What makes this strange is that the manatee offers so little of what we usually ask of myth. It does not strike. It does not vanish dramatically. It does not glow. It does not sing, or not in any register we can easily hear. It does not perform. It grazes. It drifts. It surfaces slowly, exhales, submerges again. It moves through shallow, warm water at the pace of an afternoon. And yet, across many cultures, in many centuries, something about that presence was enough to generate story. The Amazonian tradition held figures called Iara, water spirits of the rivers, sometimes depicted with features that echo the manatee. A large body, a life in water, a kind of intelligence that could not be named but could be felt. The West African tradition carried its own water spirits, its own sense that the large, quiet things in the water were not to be dismissed. When the manatee appeared in new regions, the stories were already waiting for it, or something like it, already shaped by the intuition that the large and quiet things in the water deserved a more careful kind of attention. That intuition is worth sitting with. The stories were wrong about the facts, but they were not wrong about the feeling. There is something in the manatee's presence, its size, its quietness, its apparent indifference to drama that registers as significant. The ancient mind knew that. It just had no framework for it except myth. Modern understanding has given us different frameworks. We know now about the evolutionary kinship with elephants, about the sensory whiskers, about the marching teeth and the long dives, and the slow, efficient metabolism. We know the animal scientifically in ways that would have astonished those sailors. And yet the feeling persists. People who work with manatees, researchers, veterinarians, wildlife rehabilitators, often describe something that is difficult to put in a report. A quality of presence. A sense that the animal is attending to you in some way that is not urgent and not indifferent. Not the bright alertness of a dolphin, not the wariness of a wild fish. Something slower and more considered. Something that feels, to the human nervous system, like being regarded. That perception may say as much about us as it does about the manatee. We are animals who are very sensitive to being seen, and we tend to read attention into any face that seems to orient toward us. The manatee's face, with its small eyes and its flexible muzzle and its whiskers, is the kind of face that seems to orient. Whether the attention behind it is what we imagine, no one can say with certainty. But the feeling is real, and the feeling has consequences. The manatee has become, in recent decades, one of the more visible symbols of marine conservation. Not because it is the most endangered, not because its situation is the most urgent among marine animals, but because people find it easy to care about. Its face is gentle. Its movements are slow enough to watch. It does not threaten. It does not demand. It grazes in shallow water, and when it comes close to humans, it seems genuinely curious, bumping gently against boats and swimmers, investigating with its whiskers the unfamiliar surfaces of this new world. That quality, the calm curiosity, the absence of alarm, has made it beloved, and that affection has translated into protection, into legislation, into the slow zone signs along Florida waterways, into the rescue programs and the rehabilitation pools and the warm water refuges maintained partly by human effort. The myth became love. The love became action. And the action, imperfect and incomplete as it is, has kept this animal present in the world in ways it might not otherwise have remained. There is something strange and worth noticing in that chain. The sailors who mistook manatees for sirens were wrong, and their error was a kind of smallness, the imposition of a human story onto an animal that had its own story entirely. But the feeling underneath the error, the sense that here was something that mattered, that here was a presence in the water worth attending to, that feeling was not wrong. It was early. It was imprecise. It was dressed in myth because myth was the available language. But it pointed, however clumsily, towards something real. We have spent a long time demanding spectacle from nature. We have wanted animals to be fierce, or beautiful, or strange in ways that translate into theatre. We have wanted drama from the ocean, and the ocean has often obliged. The breaching whale, the hunting shark, the electric eel, the bioluminescent bloom. The manatee does not oblige. It continues its slow work in the warm water, unbothered by our need for narrative. It grazes. It breathes. It remembers its roots. It tends its calf. It finds the warm springs in winter and returns to them year after year, carrying the knowledge of safe places in its body the way all long-lived creatures carry what they have learned. And perhaps that is a different kind of spectacle, not the kind that asks you to lean forward, the kind that asks you to go quiet. There is something that happens when we stop demanding that an animal perform for us. Something opens. The manatee, watched without expectation, becomes more interesting than the myth. The grey skin, the slow turn, the patient rise to the surface. These are not disappointments. They are the actual thing. And the actual thing, given time and quiet attention, is enough. More than enough. The sailors were looking for sirens and found manatees. We have spent centuries untangling that confusion, learning what these animals actually are, rather than what we needed them to be. And what we found, when we finally looked clearly, was not less wonderful than the myth. It was different. It was slower. It was quieter. It required more patience to see. The manatee does not live in stories. It lives in warm, shallow water, in the green drift of seagrass, in the mineral warmth of springs, in the estuaries where rivers meet the sea. It has been there for a very long time, doing what it does, asking nothing of the human imagination. That it captured the imagination anyway. That it became a symbol, a conservation icon, a creature of myth, and then of science, and then of something that might be called tenderness, says something about both the animal and about us. What it says, exactly, is not simple to state. Some things resist being said simply. They can only be felt slowly in the dark, at the edge of sleep. Everything we have learned fades for a moment into the simplest thing of all, a single day. The light is pale when you first become aware of it. Not bright, just present. A soft grey-green shifting above you, the way light looks when it has travelled a long way through water to arrive here. You are resting near the bottom, in the shallow warmth of a bay you have known for a long time. The sand beneath you is smooth. The water presses gently against every surface of your body, even and unhurried, the way it always does. You are large, and the water holds all of that largeness without any effort at all. You do not rise immediately. There is no urgency in you. The light shifts a little. Something in your body registers the morning, not as an event, but as a slow return, a readiness that builds without rushing. Then, without deciding, you begin to rise. Your paddle moves once, twice, not quickly. Your body lifts from the bottom in a long, easy arc, and the water moves around you the way it always does, parting ahead, closing behind, leaving no trace. You are very large, and yet the water accepts you without complaint. Your bones are dense, and your body is wide, and your skin is thick and grey, and none of that matters here. Here you are, weightless in the way that only water can provide. You rise toward the surface, and the light brightens, and the grey-green becomes something warmer. Your nose breaks the surface. You breathe. It is a long breath, full and unhurried. The air comes in slowly, fills something deep inside you, and then you are back beneath the surface before the moment has fully registered. That is all. The surface is there, and then you are below it again, and the breathing has happened the way breathing always happens for you. Without effort, without drama, woven into the shape of the day as naturally as anything else. You drift for a moment, neutrally suspended between the surface and the bottom. You are not thinking about where to go. You already know. The seagrass bed is not far. You have been here before, many times, across many seasons. The route is not something you have to remember in the way you might remember a name or a direction. It is more like the route remembers itself inside you, laid down across years of mornings just like this one. You turn, slowly, your whole body curving through the water, and you begin to move. The drag of the water across your skin is constant and familiar. You feel it along your sides, across the broad plane of your back, along the trailing edge of your paddle. It is not unpleasant. It is simply the texture of moving through the world. Your whiskers are already reading the water ahead of you, sensing the small shifts in current, the difference between open water and the edges of things. The bottom rises slightly beneath you. The sand becomes shallower, and then the grass begins. You slow. You do not stop. You simply become less of a traveler and more of something else, something that belongs here. The seagrass extends ahead of you in long, soft ribbons, swaying in the gentle current that moves through this bay in the morning hours. The water is warm here, warmer than where you slept. It settles around you like something familiar, like something that has been waiting. Your lips find the grass before your eyes have fully registered it. That is how it works. Your lips are flexible and precise in a way that is easy to forget until you are doing this. Pulling, gathering, angling. The grass comes away from the bottom in soft bunches. Your whiskers are everywhere in this process, feeling the texture of each stem, reading the difference between what is worth taking and what is not. You are tasting through your face, in a sense, before anything has reached your mouth at all. You chew. Your teeth are where they need to be. They have been moving forward slowly all your life, the back ones wearing down, the new ones pressing steadily forward to take their place. You have never had to think about this. Your teeth have simply been doing their work, the way the tide does its work, the way the seasons do theirs. Without announcement, without interruption. You chew, and the grass becomes something your body can use. And somewhere inside you, the long, slow work of digestion begins. You take another mouthful. The morning passes in this way. You move through the grass slowly, not covering ground so much as working it. A few pulls here, a pause, a turn, a few more. Your body is very large, and it requires a great deal of grass. And so you are patient in a way that is not patience so much as simple biology. This is what your days are. This is what they have always been. The eating is not urgent. It is continuous. It is the background hum of your existence, steady and necessary, and, in its way, deeply comfortable. You surface again without thinking. The breath comes. The air fills you. You sink back. The grass continues. At some point, the light shifts. The morning is becoming something else. The water is brighter now and warmer still, and you have moved further along the bed than you realized. You have been following something. Not a plan, but a kind of attention. The whiskers leading, the lips following, the body drifting behind, and all of it connected. All of it one continuous, unhurried act. You pause. You hang in the water, your paddle moving in the slowest possible way, just enough to keep you where you are. Below you, the grass sways. Above you, the surface catches the midday light and breaks it into shifting pieces. You are between those two things, suspended, breathing in your slow rhythm. There is no threat here. There is nothing that requires you to be elsewhere. The water is warm and the grass is present, and your body is full in the way that a body becomes full after long, steady feeding. You rest for a while, still breathing, still surfacing and descending in your quiet rhythm. This is also the day. Later, the light has shifted again, the warmth deepening. You follow something you have always followed. Not a thought, a memory that lives in your body rather than your mind. You have been through this bay before, in other seasons, and you know where the water stays warm when the days grow short. You know the shape of the channel that leads toward the spring. You know it the way you know your own breath. Not as knowledge, but as certainty. You move. The water changes as you travel. The temperature is not the same everywhere, and you feel the shifts across your whole body. A coolness at one edge of the channel, a warmth rising from somewhere below where the spring water enters. You angle toward the warmth without deciding to. It is simply where you go. The current here is gentle and constant, and it moves against your face in a way that is different from open water. Your whiskers read it. The water tastes different here too. Fresher, lighter on whatever sense it is that tells you these things. You have been coming to places like this for as long as you can remember. Longer, perhaps, than memory goes. You slow. You settle into the warmth. Other bodies are nearby. You are aware of them, not through sight, not clearly, but through the water itself, which carries the sounds of breath and the slow displacement of large bodies moving gently. You do not approach. You do not avoid. You simply share the warmth, the way you have always shared it, without ceremony or negotiation. The afternoon is quiet. You feed again, a little, where the grass grows near the spring's edge, not with the same steadiness as the morning. The day is moving towards something else now, and your body knows it. The feeding is slower. The pauses are longer. You surface, breathe, descend. Surface, breathe, descend. The rhythm is very old. The light begins to change. It is not dark yet, but the quality of the light is different. Softer, less direct. The surface above you going from bright to something gentler. The water holds the warmth of the day even as the light fades. You feel it along your sides, across your back. You are large, and the warmth is everywhere. You stop feeding. You move toward the bottom. Not quickly, never quickly. Your body descends in the same slow arc it always uses. The paddle adjusting, the body tilting slightly, the water accepting you without resistance. The sand rises to meet you. You settle, your breathing slows. The surface is not far above you. It is always there. You will rise again. Breathe, return. You have done this through every night of your life, this quiet negotiation between air and water, and it requires nothing of you now. Your body knows when to rise. It has always known. The water is warm. The grass sways somewhere nearby, unseen. Your whiskers are still. You breathe. You descend. The light above you is fading now, the surface growing dark and soft. You breathe. You descend. The bay is quiet. Your body is heavy in the good way, the way of a body that has done its day's work and found it sufficient. You have fed. You have moved through the water you know. You have followed the warmth. You have rested in it. The day has asked nothing more of you, and you have given exactly what was needed, and now the giving is finished. Your paddle barely moves. The sand is soft beneath you. The water holds you. You breathe. You descend. You are still. And after all that slow movement, what remains is not urgency, but peace. The manatee does not leave a dramatic impression on the world. It leaves the impression of a body that moved through warm water, grazed on soft plants, surfaced for breath, and rested. It leaves the impression of a mother and a calf, moving together through a route remembered and passed forward. It leaves, in some places, a meadow of seagrass a little shorter than it was before. That is enough. That has always been enough. There is something in the manatee's existence that the mind can settle into if it allows itself. Not the excitement of a predator's speed or the strangeness of a creature from the deep. Something quieter than that. A very large animal that found its answer in patience, in warmth, in the slow and steady work of being present in a place. A mammal shaped by 50 million years of refinement, and what that refinement produced was not armor or venom or cunning. It produced gentleness. It produced whiskers so sensitive they can read the current. It produced a body that floats without effort, breathes without hurry, and carries its young close for years. That is what the long work of evolution can make, given the right conditions. Calm as a design. Let your jaw unclench now, fully, if any tension remains there. Let the muscles around your eyes go soft. There is no expression required of your face. Let it be still. Your hands can open. Whatever they were holding, they can release. Let them rest, loose and open, against whatever is beneath them. The manatee, somewhere in warm water right now, is doing very little. It may be at the surface, breathing slowly in the dark, its broad body barely moving. It may be resting on the bottom, its breath held easily, its mind somewhere between waking and not. It is not waiting for anything. It is simply in the water, the way it has always been in the water, the way its kind has been in warm water for longer than most of what we know has existed. There is something restful in that continuity, something that asks nothing of you. Your body is heavy now. Let it be heavy. The weight of your limbs is easy. The weight of your whole self, settling into whatever holds you, is easy. You are supported, the way the water supports everything that trusts it, fully, without condition, without effort on either side. The manatee breathes in its slow rhythm. You breathe in yours. Both of you, in the dark, held by something larger and older than either of you, continuing. Your eyes are heavy. Let them stay closed. There is nothing required. There is nowhere to be. The warm water is far away and very close, both at once, in the way that the things we carry with us are always both. The manatee drifts. You are still. Sleep well and good night.